Kit Fisto is a renowned swordsman and Jedi Council member, considered to be one of the best lightsaber combatants the Order's ever produced. Famed for his brazen demeanor, Kit Fisto has taken 2 Padawans in his time, both Mon Calamari, the first by the name of Bant Aaron, and the second Indar Veb. However, in the wake of the Clone Wars, Kit Fisto is forced to separate from his Padawan in order to fulfill his duties as general, leaving Nadar to complete his training to knighthood without a master. After his participation in the Battle of Geonosis, Kit Fisto would go on to achieve many victories in the name of the Republic, his most notable being his various incursions within the planet Mon Calamari, where his amphibious nature proved him to be the greatest Jedi candidate for such a mission. Having shown himself as one of the most legendary of warriors within the Order, Jedi Master Kit Fisto is one of the few hand-selected by Mace Windu to confront the newly revealed Sith Lord, Darth Sidious. However, even with the assistance of 3 other legendary Jedi Council members, Kit Fisto is cut down by the rising Lord of the Sith, ultimately failing to prevent the events that would lead to the extermination of the Jedi Order and the rise of a new galactic empire. Kit Fisto is known for his haughty smile while locked in combat, as well as his kind and easygoing nature. He is unquestionably one of the greats of the Jedi Order. Once known as the Scourge of the Unknown Regions, the warrior that come to be known as Darth Nihl led his warband host among his homeworld and Nagai, seeking to conquer all within his lands. Having attracted the attention of Darth Krayt, the future usurper of the Imperial throne, Darth Nihl was brought into the One Sith Order. He achieved notoriety for his unrelenting battlefield tactics and fierce combative prowess. It was eventually proclaimed as Darth Krayt's hand, his top military enforcer. Darth Nihl would then lead the attack on Ossus, all but exterminating the Jedi Order and even putting an end to Grandmaster Cool Skywalker himself. After many more engagements against both Jedi survivors and Ronfel's loyalists, the Nagai warlord faded into obscurity amidst his master's death years later at the hands of Cade Skywalker, leading the remnants of the Sith Order into hiding to one day complete Krayt's vision for the galaxy. Darth Nihl only reaffirmed his position as a legendary Sith leader. Although this is the last known events of Darth Nihl, his battlefield cunning and unorthodox fighting style are something to be feared and respected. Kit Fisto belongs to the Nautolan race, granting him a variety of combative benefits. The first is his amphibious nature, granting him the ability to breathe underwater and swim with great speed. While the ability to remain underwater indefinitely is relevant to this fight, the high speeds he can achieve by swimming is testament to his physical capability, as it heralds his strength and endurance. Secondly, Nautolans possess head tendrils that can read the pheromone signatures of others, allowing them to better predict an opponent's next actions. The last of racial benefits is the multiple hearts within a Nautolan's chest cavity, allowing them to move increased blood and oxygen levels throughout their body, ultimately granting them greater endurance than most humanoids. However, even for a Nautolan, Kit Fisto is very impressive physically, and is often regarded as one of the fastest Jedi of the Order. His combat style and speed on the battlefield are lightning fast, having almost of his physical feats attributed to his quickness. Within the novel Cestus Deception, written by Stephen Barnes, Kit Fisto is repeatedly described as a blur when in combat. He was able to dispatch the JK droid in quick order and was able to dodge blaster fire with expert aptitude. In the novel Labyrinth of Evil, Kit Fisto cut through 2 Magna Guards in an instant, dodging the droid's attacks and cutting through them through what was described as a blue tornado unleashed by his saber. Virtually all of Kit Fisto's combative feats are explicitly make note of his mind-numbing speed, and the vast quantity of descriptions lead me to believe he is one of the fastest Jedi the Order has ever seen. Darth Nihl belongs to the Nagai race, a near-human species with no real physical advantages to speak of. Regardless, Darth Nihl has shown himself to be a viable warrior based on his physical attributes alone. He's reasonably quick both on his feet and with his saber, and has been seen making use of acrobatic maneuvers and evasions to defend himself from attack. When he had taken physical strikes in combat, he was able to rally extremely fast and carry on with no penalty. He donned blaster-resistant armor that offered added protection against such attacks. Lastly, one of Nihl's arms were replaced with a Von Grimm prosthetic, which although doesn't grant any bonuses to speak of, surely provides some additional durability than his normal armor would allow. Nihl isn't the most physically imposing Sith, but his unique fighting form proves him to be well-rounded in all physical aspects, and is able to carry himself with no sign of difficulty nor strain on the battlefield. While Darth Nihl is certainly respectable in this regard, I believe Kit Fisto outclasses him in the realm of physicality. Not only is KO awarded advantages by his race alone, advantages simply not biologically possible for his opponent, he's extremely fast both on the offensive and defensive. Nihl has been seen making use of acrobatics with ease, but Kit Fisto matches him in this regard. Even though I think Darth Nihl can take a punch better than Fisto, the Nautolan simply holds the vast majority of advantages in this category. Kit Fisto is awarded the advantage in physical prowess. However, as Darth Krayt's hand, Darth Nihl is certainly capable himself. Having been regarded as one of the best of the Order by Mace Windu, Kit Fisto's reputation as a legendary Jedi is largely attributed to his skill with the lightsaber. Kit Fisto specialized in the first form of lightsaber combat, Chico. Chico is a form that is essentially the groundwork for all other lightsaber forms, which prides itself on simplicity but also on wildness. Chico is exceptionally effective in the use of combating multiple opponents, and was such as an obvious choice for the battlefield general like Kit Fisto. Fisto has dealt with Magna Guards in short order on numerous occasions, and is very adept in dealing with blaster-wielding opponents, as he easily evades or deflects their shots, at which he then goes on to dispatch them with the assistance of his intense speed. Although this form could be wild and unpredictable, it contains an inherent weakness to one-on-one combat. However, when in the hands of master-level practitioners such as Fisto, this weakness is entirely negated, and the user's offense becomes even more unpredictable and unrelenting, while also creating more fluidity in one's movements. Kit Fisto would even further bolster the form's unpredictability by losing himself in the fervor of the fight, turning his offensive into an absolute cyclone. However, this sort of battlefield passion sacrifices much of Kit's ability to assess the situation while in a duel, and can leave him susceptible to his opponent's own strategy. However, Kit Fisto has shown restraint enough that he is able to contend with some very respectable duelists, and his background in Itaru, as well as some knowledge of Jar-Kai. Displaying Chico's aptitude for disarming opponents, Kit has managed to strip General Grievous of his sabers in combat before, and made use of it by dual wielding. He had expertly handled this duel, using Form 1's simplicity to make economic movements in his parrying, and couple his offensive with Jar-Kai maneuvers. He further threw off his opponent by making use of defensive acrobatics, and has subsequently overwhelmed his opponent. I'm under the impression that General Grievous would have lost his life in this encounter if it hadn't been for the intervention of his Magna Guards, although this is watered down TCW version Grievous and not the EU version. Regardless, every single one of Kit Fisto's combative feats paint his high-paced speed as his most defining advantage when in a fight. And in his sparring match against Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Cestus Deception, Kit was forced to give himself disadvantages in speed so that Kenobi could stand a fair chance in competing with him. This sparring match had gone on for hours, and Obi-Wan was forced to admit him the better duelist, as he unable to find opening in Kit's form. However, this example would be grossly misleading if I did not mention that this sparring match had taken place before the events of Episode 3, so Obi-Wan was not yet in his prime. Regardless, Obi-Wan was still an impressive Surisu specialist even at this time, despite the fact he hadn't reached his full potential quite yet. Moving on from Kit Fisto's show's speed, he was also awarded impressive strength. In his mission to Mon Calamari, he had sliced the Separatist warcraft in half as they tried to run him over. Kit Fisto used this strength to implement hand-to-hand combat and improvised fighting in a variety of instances. He has extensive knowledge inflicting strikes to pressure points on his enemies, and has demonstrated his aptitude in this fighting style even against multiple opponents. In conclusion, Kit Fisto is an extremely unpredictable and unconventional lightsaber combatant who has mastered his chosen lightsaber form and totally negated its most evident weaknesses. His praise as a legendary swordsman is well earned. Much like Fisto, Darth Nihl is an exceedingly unique lightsaber combatant. Even before beginning his life as a Sith, Nihl had already ravaged his homeworld Nagai through the leading of his warband and his own skill as a warrior. He has been noted as an expert in all blade lengths, and has actually created his own unique fighting form that complements his glaive-like lightsaber. Darth Nihl's offensive method seemingly relied on using his lightsaber's elongated hilt to make large and robust horizontal slashes. In doing so, he attempts to off-balance his opponent and pressure them into leaving a hole in their defense. Then in an opening, he can make a debilitating strike, and then finishes the enemy with a linear thrust to a vital area. He's proven this strategy's effectiveness firsthand in defeating the Jedi Master Wollf Myth, as he roped him into a desired position, severed his arm and missed an opening in his defense, and then completely incapacitated him with a piercing strike through the chest. Defensively, Nihl kept himself out of opponents' reach by pressuring them at a distance with his longer hilt length, and deflecting from a long distance away, rather than allowing a blade to come close within his proximity. Whenever an opponent managed to close the distance between Nihl, he could either implement a physical strike to reassert the distance, or stun them. If no such opportunity for a physical strike was available, he can make use of acrobatics to evade his enemy's attack altogether, and again get himself out of reach. Nihl has employed the self-made strategy to great effect, fending off and holding his own against duelists that are themselves formidable. I believe my assessment of Darth Nihl's fighting strategy is further proven true by some of his talents shown in the Legacy role-playing guide, which directly correlate with his movements and attack types as seen in the Legacy comic series. However, as seen in one encounter with Kate Skywalker, Nihl could only keep his opponent at a distance for so long, a reality that immediately struck home for him as he lost his arm in that engagement. Regardless, Nihl's unorthodox fighting style will no doubt off-throw even the most experienced of duelists for a time, and because he is able to keep himself at such a far distance away and employ such dynamic movements, a strong defense is an absolute must for any opponent. In conclusion, Nihl's unorthodox fighting style is viable because of his tactical experience, vast knowledge of countless weapon types, and well-rounded fighting ability and physicality. Any opponent will be thrown off by his unique form for at least a time. This is an especially interesting comparison to make, because both these combatants are very unorthodox in their fighting style. While Kit Fisto prides himself in a lightsaber form that all Jedi are taught to some degree, he takes Chico to a legendary level, as he most entirely negates its weaknesses and enhances its strength through extensive wartime experience and fervor in battle. Darth Nihl, on the other hand, has such a knowledge of weaponry that he was able to create an exceedingly unique fighting form that will completely off-throw any combatant he comes across. However, Darth Nihl's fighting form heavily relies on keeping his opponent at a distance, and given the fact that Kit Fisto takes his speed to the absolute extreme, it'll be even more difficult to do so than usual. As such, he'll be forced to make use of physical strikes and acrobatics to reassert the distance, and will have to do so quickly lest he become overwhelmed. Yet Kit Fisto isn't without weakness to his opponent either. In consequence to Kit Fisto's preference for losing himself in the thrill of battle, he's ultimately negating much of his opportunity to implement strategic thinking while in combat. Nihl's form entirely relies on strategic thinking, and his style is completely tailored to fit his preferred combat tactics. Kit Fisto could easily be caught up in the web of Darth Nihl's strategy if he isn't careful, and by the time he makes note of what is happening, it could already be too late. However, even despite his strategic thinking, Nihl will be forced to contest with Kit's high speed and completely unpredictable offensive for the entirety of the battle, and as such will have to keep his own wits about him. And ultimately, Nihl will have to adapt his tactics as the situation demands, and given the unpredictability of Kit Fisto, is going to change a lot. It is for the lightning fast and totally unpredictable threat that he poses that earns Kit Fisto the advantage of martial ability. Kit Fisto's lightsaber has been depicted with both blue and green crystals. For the purposes of this fight, we'll be going with the green ones. Fisto's lightsaber is relatively simple design, but did possess a few interesting features. The weapon has a set of grooves aligning the hilt, which lessens traction and offers different options in hand placement. The bottom of the hip pocket to a subtle point is a striking surface, which complements Kit Fisto's use of improvised fighting and weaponry. Lastly, Kit Fisto's saber components are encased with a waterproof housing, allowing him to make use of it underwater, which also looks cool as shit. Before I go into detail regarding Nihl's choice of weaponry, I have to admit that for years I've written it off as a huge disadvantage to the character. Until I decided to make this video and look deeper into his weapon, I've completely shunned it for its somewhat unwieldy and cumbersome handle. However, after having taken the liberty to read up on the use of polearms and listen to some trained weapons specialists discuss their benefits online, I've since changed my opinion. Darth Nihl's lightsaber was self-made and long-handled, a weapon most comparable to the glaive. Its handle was roughly a meter in length and featured a standard blade size. This weapon could be slung around the joints of a user to create intense speed and add efficiency, ultimately saving energy on the part of the wielder while also employing a constant offense. Its long hilt provided a significant advantage in reach and also allowed him to attack different points on an enemy with intense speed. It could be thrusted forward to the upper half of the body and then immediately be brought back down to an opponent's feet in little time, ultimately granting a wielder better chance in exploiting defensive openings consequently. The hilt was made of York coral, and as such was lightsaber resistant. Regardless, the hilt does still pose a weakness in the weapon becoming disarmed, as it could be swept out of one's grasp if enough force is applied. Despite my previous misconceptions, I have since learned that the weapon could still prove useful in close quarters fighting, even if the opponent manages to close a distance. If hard pressed, Darth Nihl can instead position his hand closer to the blade, further up on the hilt, and partially negate the cumbersome nature of the weapon to defend himself appropriately. Some pictures show Nal making use of his standard grip lightsaber, so if his usual evasion or hand-to-hand combat tactics prove ineffective, I have no doubt he will resort to this compromise of his weapon. I think it goes without saying that Kit Fisto's lightsaber is fairly standard, but still provides the advantages of maneuverability. It also yields greater offensive and defensive options, and a lessened risk of being disarmed. While Nal's glaive-like weapon is indeed a bit cumbersome, it does grant a very significant reach advantage, as well as its own breadth of unique movements. For the reasons I had stated earlier, many of its disadvantages can be partially negated by an experienced user. Where I would normally give Kit Fisto's standard lightsaber the advantage, I simply could not do so just based on the merit of such a claim alone. Every ebook I had skimmed, and every studied historic expert I listened to, made it perfectly clear that glaives and even polearms in general have a significant advantage in single combat against a standard sword wielder. Although these experts are obviously speaking of real weapons rather than lightsabers, of normal people and not Jedi, I'm inclined to take their word for it. Even when Fisto does close a distance, the glaive can be adapted to the situation. Darth Nihl's long-handled lightsaber is given the advantage of weaponry. Much of Kit Fisto's force skill is shown as enhanced speed and acrobatics, which I've already thoroughly mentioned as feats of physicality and martial skill. However, Kit Fisto could also employ impressive and telekinetic attacks, and has pioneered some really unique aquatic-based force maneuvers. He has shown himself able to redirect missile shots and even misdirect squadrons of underwater vehicles and large masses. While underwater, he employed a unique water bomb force attack, which could completely rip through metal and smash into his opponents with incredible force. He could also make use of a similar attack on a smaller scale, which is akin to a spear-like projectile. Although these sort of attacks can only be employed in an aquatic environment, they still speak to his ingenuity and knowledge of the Force. Kit Fisto could lift objects to be launched as projectiles, and could make use of force pushes against enemies. Additionally, he was adept in force sense and the occasional mind trick. He's a well-rounded force user, and one that's innovated some really spectacular water-based attacks. Darth Nihl can pull from a variety of force abilities that aid him both in and out of combat. When he was hunting his rival Darth Talon on the planet Korriban, he was able to sense her even through her force cloak and the veil of dark energy surrounding the tombs. It is worth noting that Wollf Myth was unable to detect Darth Talon's location when he had his confrontation with the Sith, and Wollf Myth possessed a very strong connection to the Force, so much so that it was insinuated he wanted to live as a Force ghost after he died. Deploying beast control in the same tomb, Nihl was able to completely bend the mind of a Sith hound to his will, not only preventing it from attacking him, but actually having it follow him for a time. This is extremely worthy of note because Sith hounds are created through Sith alchemy, and as such are notorious for their strong will and ferocious tendencies. For combative purposes, Nihl was very imposing in his use of the Force. He was able to employ force pushes and make use of force-enhanced acrobatics for added maneuverability. His force choke was absolutely devastating, and although he has only been seen making use of it once, its effect was debilitating. He managed to break through the force barrier of Cade Skywalker and choke him to the point where he bled through his nose and eyes. He then passed out from the lack of oxygen and could have been killed there if it weren't for Krayt's need of Cade. It's worth noting that Cade had his intention on Talon before he was choked, but this is still a very impressive feat regardless. Lastly, Darth Nihl was able to fire torrents of lightning that were so powerful he was able to kill Cole Skywalker during the attack on Ossus. Even though Nihl did not take Cole head-on in this confrontation, it is still worthy of note considering it was only one torrent of lightning, and Cole had not been injured previously. In conclusion, Nihl's force abilities are potent enough for them to be a viable fallback option if needed, and the fact that those from the Skywalker legacy have been overtaken by its strength leads me to believe the raw power of his force skill is very worthy of respect. While Kit Fisto has shown some really unique force powers underwater, this won't be something you can make use of in this matchup, and ultimately only speaks to his combative creativity when using the Force. Every other force power that you make use of in this matchup is easily replicated to a similar or greater degree of skill by Nihl, such as enhanced movement and force pushes. Nihl, on the other hand, has some really impressive displays of power going from that have been overwhelming enough to have put some serious hurt on those of the Skywalker family. In addition, Fisto has really little defense for such attacks, especially Nihl's Force Lightning. While he may be able to guard himself from the Force choke by use of the Force Barrier, he has no way of countering the Force Lightning, as he has shown no feats in Tuna Menace nor absorption through his lightsaber. As such, he will have to entirely rely on his speed to either outmaneuver the torrents or overwhelm Nihl. and as such holds no real advantage over Nihl in the Force category. It is for this reason that Darth Nihl will be given the lead in Force skill, although Kit Fisto's Force enhanced speed will still be of great benefit to him. In a hypothetical battle between the two, I ultimately see a long and arduous game of maneuvering, where Kit Fisto pressures Darth Nihl with his unpredictable offense as he attempts to negate Nihil's reach advantage. Kit Fisto will eventually get within Nihil's proximity and will force him to make use of a kick to his hip to reassert the distance, or make use of evasion. Nihl may put up his own offensive, but Kit will be more than capable of evading, and ultimately closes the distance several times over. Nihl is going to get pummeled with physical strikes, and have many close calls. Eventually, he's going to have to realize that he has to make use of the biggest advantage he has, his force abilities and his strategy. After Fisto is out of reach, Nihl will sweep horizontally with his glaive-like weapon, and force Kit to desired placement. In his battle frenzy, Kit will be doing what he's been doing this whole confrontation, evading easily. What he will fail to realize before it is too late, is that Nihl is closing him in between the sweep of his saber and the path of a torrent of lightning, will be caught and overtaken by its extreme potency. Having seriously debilitated his opponent, he moves in for the kill, and makes use of a forward linear thrust right into Kit Fisto's vitals. While Kit Fisto is obviously the better duelist, he has nothing to use his defense against force attacks other than his speed. Nihl will no doubt be beaten and battered, and be constantly under threat from Fisto when he manages to close the distance. However, he has been able to hold off the unrelenting Juyo assault of Cade Skywalker for an appreciable amount of time, and so would be able to defend himself for a reasonable period against Fisto as well. Ultimately, Nihl knows he's going to have to manipulate this fight in a way that makes use of his force advantage, and Fisto will fall right into it given his battle lust. However, I acknowledge that Fisto is an extremely unpredictable opponent, and as such bears a good chance of cutting Nihl down when he manages to get within his opponent's proximity. For that reason, I'd only give Darth Nihl a 6 out of 10 advantage in a fight against Kit Fisto. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I thought this was a really interesting matchup, and I was surprised to see it hadn't been done before. It pains me to see Kit Fisto lose, but I did my best to look at these two objectively, and ultimately this is the conclusion I came to, even if it wasn't the verdict I actually wanted myself. Although I will say that I think Kit Fisto is way cooler. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to leave your comments and thoughts down below. If you have any suggestions for new matchups, I'm interested to hear them. Just know that it might be a while till I get to them, because I already have a decently long schedule planned, and I plan on trying to stick to it as much as possible. But like always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.